hours from the tide that would drown her on the rock. A Lakota chief swam out alone. The rope was still in my hand when I walked to the water. Not to use it. I want to be clear about that. It was just the rope I'd used to tie the sorrel that morning, and I'd coiled it out of habit when I turned her loose, and I was carrying it because that's what you do with rope. You carry it until you need it. I'd been carrying things my whole life that I no longer had a use for. Might as well add a rope. The lake was low that September. The summer had been dry and hard, and the water had pulled back from the shore like it was tired of the land. Left a pale ring on the rock, a watermark showing where it used to be. I knew that feeling. I walked out to where the mud began and stood there. You want to know what it's like when a people is ending. It doesn't happen the way the old songs say. It's not a battle or a fire. It's forms, papers, men in offices who can't look at you. A line drawn on a map that says this was yours and now it isn't. And here is why. And here is a number and sign here. And the number is not enough for the land, and we both know it, but the signing is what they're waiting for, and eventually a man signs because he is tired, and his sons are hungry, and his wife has been coughing since February. I'd signed 3 months before that morning. Left my mark on something I didn't have the English to read all the way through. The interpreter was a young man from Kansas who smelled like hair oil, and said, "It's fine, it's fine. It's standard language." And I believed him because I had nothing left to spend on disbelief. Mato Sapa, that's what my mother called me. Black Bear. She said it because when I was born I was dark and round and I cried very loud. I was not the chief she thought she was raising. I was not anything particular yet. I became the chief because my Uncle Chayton died of cholera in the winter of my 23rd year, and because the people needed someone to stand in front of things, and I was tall and I was quiet, and I had not yet made any catastrophic errors, which is about all that standing in front of things requires when you're young. I was 51 years old that September morning, standing in the mud at the edge of a lake I did not own anymore, holding a rope I had no use for. I heard her before I saw her. Not words, a sound something between a call and a cough, and I almost didn't turn. The mind, when it is that far gone, does a thing where it decides the sounds it hears are not real. The wind, a bird, the creak of the world settling. I'd been doing that for weeks, hearing things that turned out to be nothing. But this was not nothing. There was a rock shelf that rose out of the water maybe 60 yards from shore, low granite, flat on top, and in the wet years it was underwater, but in the dry years it sat proud of the surface. And there was a woman on it. She was sitting, or trying to. One hand braced on the rock, the other arm pulled against her side in a way that meant pain. She was soaked through. Her hair was dark and loose and plastered to her face, and she was not from here. I could see that from the shore. Her clothes, what was left of them, were wrong for this country. Something that might have been a traveling dress once. Her boots were gone. I looked at her for a moment. I looked at the water. The lake, even in its dry September state, was cold enough to take a man's breath. I was 51 years old, and I had not swum in probably a decade. My right knee had been bad since a fall from a horse the winter before. I was wearing my wool coat and my boots, both of which would drag. I dropped the rope on the bank and started pulling off the coat. Not because I had decided to save her. You understand. The decision happened before the thinking. My hands were already on the buttons. I was already stepping out of the boots. And I stood there for a second in just my shirt and my trousers, and I thought, you might not make it back. And then I thought, so. I will tell you something about that word, so. It is not nothing. It is not nothing the way some people think it is nothing. It is a kind of test. You say so and you wait to see what rises up in you to answer it. Protest. Refusal. Some voice that says, no, wait, there are things left. There are people who need you. There are things worth doing. I waited. The voice didn't come. But I went in anyway, because she was on the rock. That part, the going in, I can't explain better than that. She was on the rock, and I was not a man who watched a person drown from shore. Whatever else I had become, or stopped being, I was not that. The cold hit me like a hand across the face. I gasped and went under and came up kicking, and the mud kicked off my feet, and then I was in real water past the shelf, and the cold was everywhere in my ears, pressing at my ribs. I found my stroke. It wasn't pretty. I'm not saying it was the swimming of a young man. It was the swimming of a body that remembered swimming, the arms going, the legs doing what legs do, and 60 yards is not so far, not really, though it was far enough. I got to the rock, and she was watching me. Her eyes were very dark and very clear, and she had stopped making the sound she'd been making. She just watched me come, like she wasn't surprised. "Can you move?" I said. Her English was careful, deliberate. "My wrist, I think it's broken." "Your wrist?" I fell getting onto the rock. I couldn't, the current was taking me, and I grabbed the edge and I fell. She showed me the wrist, and I could see it, the wrong angle, the swelling already starting. She'd been on that rock for a while. Hours, maybe. "The rest of you?" "Cold, everything cold." "Can you get in the water if I hold you?" She looked at the water. The expression on her face was the same expression I imagine I had standing in the mud before I went in. Not fear, something past fear. The accounting. "Yes," she said. Getting off that rock was the hard part. She had to use me as the step and brace because she couldn't use the bad wrist, and even with me in the water below her, steadying, when she slipped into the cold she made a sound I won't describe. Pure pain. The arm. I caught her under the shoulders, and she grabbed my shirt with her good hand, a grip like something mechanical, and I started back to shore. I'm not going to make it sound easy. It wasn't easy. I had 60 yards of cold water with a woman in my arms, and she was trying to help, trying to kick. But her legs were stiff with the cold, and the bad wrist was against my chest, and I could feel her fighting not to let it knock against me, and we went under once, just briefly, just enough. And I found the bottom with my feet and pushed up, and we broke the surface, and she was coughing. I got her to the mud. I got her out. We lay there on the bank for a time that I couldn't measure. Her on her back, me on one knee beside her, breathing hard. My chest was doing something I didn't love. My knee was telling me things. But she was breathing, and breathing is the first thing, and everything else is secondary to breathing. After a while she said, "I've been there since last night." Since last night. My horse threw me. I don't know where. I walked until I reached the water, and I thought I could. There was a boat on the far shore. I thought I could swim to it. "The boat's been sunk since June," I said. "Storm." She was quiet. Then, "I didn't know that." "No. If you hadn't been here." I didn't say anything to that. She turned her head and looked at me. Directly. The way that some people look and some people don't, not around you or through you, but at you, straight at the face, like your face is worth looking at, like it is a thing of interest. "Thank you," she said. Not the way people say it when they're embarrassed to say it. The way a person says it when they mean the whole weight of it. When they've had time on a rock to understand what the weight is. "You need a fire," I said, "and that wrist needs to be set." "I know. Can you walk?" She sat up slowly, testing. "I think so. My camp is half a mile, through the trees." "All right." She stood. She was taller than I'd thought, and the look on her face when she stood, the steadying of herself, the squaring of the shoulders in a wet, ruined dress, there was something in it that I recognized. The thing a person does when they have decided they will not give in to what their body is doing. I'd seen that look on warriors. I'd seen it on old women in winter. I had not expected to see it on a soaking white woman with a broken wrist on the shore of a lake in September. Her name was Margaret. I learned that at the fire. She was from Pennsylvania originally, and then from Kansas, and then from a territory I won't name, following a husband who had died of a fever 2 springs before. She had stayed on because the leaving felt like giving up, which I understood, and because she'd put money into a piece of land that she was not ready to abandon, which I also understood. She was 43 years old. She had no children living. She had come out here alone to see about a boundary dispute on her land, and her horse had done what horses will do. She talked a little, not too much. She asked me my name, and when I told her, she said it quietly to herself once, like she was learning it, not performing the learning. Mato Sapa, Black Bear. That's a strong name, she said. My mother thought so. Is she? 20 years gone. I'm sorry. I set the wrist while the fire was hot enough to keep her attention on the warmth rather than what my hands were doing. I've set bones before. You have to be quick and certain, and you can't stop in the middle. She gripped the branch I gave her, both eyes open, and she made one sound, and then it was done, and she breathed out slow and long and looked at me. That's the worst part, she said. The setting is the worst part, yes. Good. I had dried meat, and I had corn, and I had coffee, and we ate. She was hungry in the way that people are when fear has been keeping them from knowing it. She ate steadily and without apology. I respected that. She slept before the fire got low. I kept it up. I sat across from her and watched it, and I thought about the rope I'd left on the bank. I thought about the signing. I thought about my wife, Winona, who had been dead for years, a fast sickness, 3 days and gone, and I had not been prepared for the way the world looked after that. Like a picture with the center missing. You keep looking at the edges trying to find it, and the edges just keep going. I thought about the morning, the mud, the sound I heard before I turned. There is a thing that happens sometimes when a man has gone very far in a particular direction, very far toward a particular ending, and then something interrupts him. Something that says, not yet, not this morning. This morning there is a thing to do. And the man does the thing, and afterwards he is not the same man who was walking toward the water. He can't get back to that place exactly. The interruption has changed the distance. I don't know how to say it better than that. I'm not a poet. I'm a man who swam 60 yards in cold water because there was a woman on a rock and I was the only one on the shore. But I was alive in a way I had not been an hour before. My hands were cold, my knee hurt. I could feel my heartbeat in my shoulder from the swim. All of it was there, all of it was saying, you are in a body in a morning in September. You are here. She woke around midday. She woke and looked at the fire and then looked at me, and she didn't seem surprised to find me there. She sat up and flexed the fingers of the wrapped wrist, carefully watching them. It's a good wrapping, she said. I've done it before. I imagine you've done a great many things before. There was a quality to how she said it. Not flattery, not that sickly thing some people do, just an acknowledgement. Like she was saying, I see the kind of man you are. I was paying attention. The lines on your face are something I have already accounted for. My people's land, I said. I don't know why I said it. I hadn't said it aloud to anyone. They took it. The papers were signed in June, this lake. I looked at the water through the trees. My father used to tell a story about this lake. His father told him. 7 generations that story went back at least. She was quiet. She looked at the lake. I'm sorry, she said. Not the sorry people say to fill space. The sorry that comes when a person is looking at a thing that is too large for them to fix, and they know it and they say sorry anyway because there is nothing else they have to offer that is honest. I signed it, I said. You were in an impossible place. Yes. That's different from being wrong. I looked at her. She was looking at the lake still, her jaw set. Something in her profile, not beautiful, not the way young women are thought to be beautiful, but something more durable, the kind of face that has made 100 decisions and survived them. You still had it in you, she said. This morning, whatever they took, they didn't take that. I didn't answer. I was on that rock for most of a night, she said. I had a lot of time to think. I thought a good many things were going to end for me there, and they didn't, because of you, because you were standing on the shore. I almost wasn't, I said. She turned and looked at me then, that direct look again. But you were, she said. We were quiet for a while. The fire settled. A hawk went over, very high, turning slow circles on something we couldn't see. I need to get back to my land, she said. The boundary dispute, I can't let them just, she stopped, shook her head once. I can't let them take it without a fight. I understood that. My horse, I said. She knows the way toward the settlement, she'll take you. I can't take your horse. I'll walk. I've walked worse. She started to argue and I put my hand up, not unkindly, and she closed her mouth. After a moment she smiled, just slightly, like she'd decided something about me. You're going to be difficult, she said. Probably, I said. We broke the camp together. She worked with one hand and didn't ask for help until she needed it and asked for it plainly when she did. I saddled the sorrel. She mounted awkwardly because of the wrist and I steadied the horse's head, and when she was settled, she looked down at me from the saddle. She had found a piece of paper somewhere, a folded square from her coat pocket, and she held it down to me. That's where my land is, she said. The boundary line if you ever come that way. A pause. I make a very good meal. And I have a spare room and a roof that doesn't leak, which I understand is not nothing out here. I looked at the paper. I understand if you don't, she said. She stopped, started again. I only think it would be a shame if two people who'd already found each other once didn't try to find each other again. I put the paper in my shirt pocket. She looked at me for a moment from up on the horse, just looked at me, not with pity, not with thanks, not with anything that required me to be smaller or larger than I was, just with that clear, direct regard, like I was a man worth looking at, like I was exactly the size I was, and that was sufficient. Matosapa, she said. Margaret, I said. She turned the horse and rode. I stood on the bank and watched her go until the trees took her. The lake was behind me. The paper was in my pocket. My hands were steady and my knee hurt, and the hawk was still up there, making its slow, deliberate circles, and I was breathing. I was breathing the way a man breathes when the morning has gone a different direction than he thought it would. I found the rope where I'd left it in the mud. I coiled it and put it over my shoulder, and I started walking. Not toward the water, away from it, through the trees north in the direction of the settlement, which was 12 miles and which my knee would tell me about every step of the way, and that was fine. That was more than fine. Every step of the way I would know exactly where I was.